Hi, guys. My name is Cassidy, and I would like to welcome all who are here today and those who are watching over live stream. Thank you so much. I would also, before we get started, please note the feedback forms on your tables. Please take some time to share your thoughts on our programming. We want to encourage you to offer programming suggestions as well. With that, I am delighted to introduce Brad Schiller. Brad Schiller has an MBA from Missouri State University in 2018 and has been personally researching in and investing in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies since late 2017. Please help me welcome Brad Schiller.
Thank you. Yep, and then today what I do professionally is I'm a sales analyst for Ocean Spray, so I do a lot of analyzing data and interpreting it, so kind of fits in my wheelhouse a little bit, but this is a topic I'm very passionate about, so I'm excited to share what I know with you guys today. And just first to start with a disclaimer, so this presentation is for informal, it's informational, and it's hopefully entertainment for you, for those purposes only. It's not an offer to sell or trade, a solicitation to buy, or a recommendation to buy any security, cryptocurrency, or related product, nor does it constitute an offer to provide investment advice or other related services by me. I may or may not have a financial investment with the things I talk about today. In preparing this presentation, no individual person or anyone's personal needs have been factored in, but basically, long story short, I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. And then I wanted to start with a quote here. So, innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity and not a threat. So cryptocurrency and digital assets is an opportunity to learn, it's an innovation, so that's how it should be pursued. And then this picture on the right, so I'm not going to talk about when to buy or sell or talk about a lot of price action. I'm here to actually help you understand what it is and so you can kind of learn more about it. And they say don't invest in something you don't know about, so this will get you started hopefully learning. And then I would encourage you to continue to learn outside of this presentation as well. And so here's what I'm going to go over. So I'm going to say start with why, the history of Bitcoin, Bitcoin versus gold, and SOV stands for store of value. I'll answer some common criticisms that you hear. I'll go through Dave Ramsey's baby steps, kind of where it fits in maybe a traditional investing thesis. Then we'll have time for questions at the end. And I do have my slides numbered, so if you do have a question about any particular topic, just go ahead and write down the number it's on, and I'll circle back to that at the end. But if you do have a burning question like you want to ask right away, I won't be offended if you ask that. Okay, so start with why. So you need to keep why at the center of what you're doing, whether it's investing, starting a business, or anything in your life. You got to think, why am I actually doing this versus the how and the what. So keep that at the core of why you're doing it. And then for more on that, there's actually a book and a TED Talk by an author named Simon Sinek. He'll go more in depth with that, but that's the gist of it. And so my why is I'm actually seeking financial freedom for not just myself, but also my family. I believe blockchain, Bitcoin, and crypto assets have potential to make our world a better and safer place. And I want to share what I've learned with the community. And today I'm not here to actually sell you on the idea. I'm not an expert. Nobody is an expert. So if they say, oh, I know everything, I'm an expert, that's usually a good sign to run away. And it's a new and complicated space, so there's a lot of stuff going on with it. So I'm not going to be able to cover everything in this presentation, but I hope to be the spark to start you on your learning journey or continue helping you with your journey that you're on already. And so for some history, I'm actually going to go back about 100 years to 1921. So Henry Ford, one of our famed inventors from America, he made the case that we need electric money. And the quote to take away from this piece here is, almost everybody in the world except for the newspapers and bankers recognize that civilization has entered in a new era. Newspapers don't see it, and international bankers don't want to see it. It would mean changes in world finance, and bankers always oppose changes. So even him saying that 100 years ago, it's very similar to what you hear today. Like, oh, the media doesn't want to do this, or the world order, or whatever, and then bankers don't want to make change because this kind of upends their system of power. So naturally, some of those same themes that he had 100 years ago still exist today. And then I'm going to go through a couple charts, and I'll explain why shortly here. So this is a chart of our U.S. national debt. So you can see where the arrow is, that's where it really started to exponentially grow. So obviously having a lot of debt's an issue. And then here, you'll see our U.S. trade balance. So we used to be a net exporter of goods, and then today, now we're a net importer of goods. And then as far as saving for a house, it used to take you maybe 2-3 years worth of work to get there. Now you're anywhere from 7 plus, and then even recently, I have some stats here. So in Bentonville, really close to home, median home sale went from $300,000 all the way up to $450,000 in just 2021 alone. And then on the right here, you can see how that is across the country. So it's really taken off these last couple of years with inflation. And then not saying this is good or bad, but the median age of people when they first get married has gone up a lot. And a lot of men will say, I'm not financially ready to get married. Like, you probably hear that a lot, especially if you watch like The Ultimatum on Netflix. That's a common theme. And then again, not saying this is good or bad, but the percent of 18 to 29-year-olds that live with their parents has gone up a lot too, typically because of financial reasons. And then something you hear a lot too these days is companies are being greedy, they're keeping their profit, they're not paying their workers, which is actually true. It used to kind of fall along, if the company did well, you did well. Now you see that divergence right there around the same time again. And then one last one here. So this is the price of Campbell soup, and it's their tomato soup. And so this is an item that's pretty consistent, like a staple. We buy a lot, buy the same size, so it's hard to hide inflation. So you can see the price of that just all of a sudden skyrocketed. And then if they don't raise the price, the picture on the right, you can see they're recommending you use less garlic than they did before, just to make it seem like you're getting more for your money, or they'll make the size smaller to hide inflation. So obviously prices have gone up, but anyone have any guess what happened in 1971 during all those divergences?
Went off the gold standard?
That's correct, yep. So we went off of the gold standard. And so gold is a hard asset that our money used to be pegged to. And you'll see here in 1971, we went off of that standard. And so a lot of problems started happening correlationally, not necessarily because of that. That's not the case I'm making. And then you'll see too on the left, when Ford made that statement, the purchasing power of a dollar went down at about half. And then a bonus fact there in 1933, it was made illegal to actually own gold. So gold was taken to banks and it was basically confiscated, or you'd be put in jail. So that's something to consider. And then towards the end there, you'll see Bitcoin is created. And so Bitcoin was actually created as a response to the 08-09 financial crash. That's part of what you see in the paper that Satoshi Nakamoto created. But I'll talk a little bit more of that later. And so now we see there's a problem. Now we came off of gold, but I'm going to take the next few moments here to actually cover gold versus Bitcoin as a store of value to show kind of a case that I think it actually has already proven that it does have value. So the first one is that it's verifiable. So Bitcoin actually operates on a system of verification, not a system of trust. And so there's actually a saying, don't trust, verify. And I have an example kind of how this actually works. So I got this piece of paper here. I'm going to hand it to Lily. Did everybody see that? Okay, can we all agree that it was one piece of paper? Anyone disagree? It's about 609. I gave it to her about 609. We all come to a consensus on that. So that's pretty much how the Bitcoin mining network actually works, is you send a transaction and then a bunch of independent parties verify it, and then we just accept it as fact, and then we keep moving on, and that's immutable, basically. I'll talk a little more about that later, but that's kind of a simplified version of how it works. And then as far as gold, you can verify it, but you need machines to weigh it. You need to see the quality of it. Is it pure gold? Is it mixed with something else? So there's more stuff. And then if you don't know exactly how to do that, you rely on a third party. And then you also can't verify exactly how much gold there is in the world, whereas Bitcoin, you can verify exactly how much there will be currently and how much there ever will be. And then where mining actually happens, so a big criticism in the past used to be it was really dependent on China. And then you'll see there China actually banned mining, and so it pretty much completely went off. A lot of it went to North America, but they're starting to grow again. And so mainly what I'm just trying to show is it's happening in a lot of different places. And even though China tried to ban it, because obviously these kind of ideas aren't very prevalent there, they weren't successful. People are actually turning back on their miners, and you can see that on the network. So fungibility, this isn't like a big piece of it, but basically it just means like the first one isn't worth more than the second one. Whereas like with an NFT, that's something you hear commonly. So it's similar to like a baseball card. Like if you get the very first one, it's worth more than the second one. But basically both Bitcoin and gold, they're fungible, so it doesn't matter if it's the first one ever made or the second one, they're all worth the same value. So portability. So Bitcoin and other crypto assets can be stored on exchange, which is called a hot wallet, or it can be stored in a hardware wallet, which is cold storage. So like you can have all the Bitcoin in the world on my phone, hypothetically. Whereas with gold, it's a heavy metal, not easy to move over borders. And then if you have enough gold, there's more barriers to physically moving it. Like you may not have a truck that can carry all that weight. And then also with gold, there's paper claims, like an investment vehicle through ETFs, for example. So you can actually artificially inflate the supply of gold. And then, basically that. So then as far as durability, so hypothetically, this is kind of a negative of Bitcoin, but it can last forever from a technological standpoint. But people have actually lost their Bitcoin because they lost their private key, which is kind of like their password to their wallet. And it's estimated there's 2.8 to 4 million Bitcoin lost. There's only ever going to be 21 million, so that's somewhat of a significant portion, which gold does have an advantage here because it's existed for over 4.5 billion years. And then as far as divisibility, there's a huge advantage here for Bitcoin. And so we normally talk about the USD price of Bitcoin, which is around like 29, 30,000 today, but it can actually be broke down into 8 decimal places. And so in the middle there, you'll see on the far left, that'd be 1 Bitcoin, and then the far right is 1 Satoshi. And this is actually named after the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonymous person or group of people. It could be a man, could be a woman, could be a group of people. We don't actually know. So that's kind of the mystique of Bitcoin too. And as far as gold, you can't really shave it into smaller pieces. Like it's usually traded by the ounce, but if you want to make it like 1/10 of an ounce, you need a lot of like machinery to do that, so it's not quite as feasible. And then I did this yesterday, so $1 equals about 3,400 sats. So that's kind of the conversion. So that's an easier way to kind of wrap your head around it. And then as far as scarcity, this is a big part of why Bitcoin's amazing. So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And then, like I said, some Bitcoin's been lost, 2.8 to 4 million. So that only increases the scarcity of the asset. And to also put that in perspective, there's around 56 million millionaires globally. And then just the US, there's 22 million. So there's not even one for every single millionaire, let alone everybody in the world. So it's ultra scarce. And then, like I said, with gold, we don't exactly know how much there is. We kind of have ideas like what's in circulation. But then because of ETFs and financial instruments like that, it can artificially inflate the supply with paper claims. And then it's been found there's actually gold in space that can be mined, so people could take it out of anywhere really and inflate the supply more. And then on the topic of inflation, I want to cover that a little bit here as an aside. So today our inflation is around 8.3%, as you guys all probably know. And then a lot of people actually believe the number's higher than the official government number. And then when you contrast that with Bitcoin, so the current inflation rate of Bitcoin is about 1.76%, which is in line. Our Federal Reserve actually wants 2% inflation, like under ideal circumstances. That's their goal. So that's how far off we're missing the goal right now. And then you can see exactly how much Bitcoin supply exists now, in the future, and then when. So there's a lot more transparency than any government or central bank will ever give you. And you can see some main countries here, how big their inflation is. And there's some countries that, even Venezuela, 200%, like that'd be a terrible environment to live in. So we should feel fortunate, I guess, with our circumstances even. But if you don't believe me, right here, this is the exact supply schedule of Bitcoin. And it's kind of trimmed down at the end because it's very minuscule. But if you look at 2020, that was the last time a Bitcoin halving happened. And so basically what happens there is we go from 50 to 25 to 12.5 to 6.25. Every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that can be mined gets halved every 4 years, basically in line with the year the president gets elected. That's the year the halving happens usually. And so at the end of this decade, almost 21 million have been mined already. So there's only like small little increments the miners are going to be fighting for. And basically to visualize that, the inflation rate drastically reduces as we go along here. So by the end of the decade, there's almost no new supply being issued relative to early on. So assuming demand goes up, supply technically decreases or stays the same, that's going to lead price to go higher. So getting back to these themes here I was talking about. So as far as an established history, Bitcoin's only been around since 2008. And despite its short existence, there's never been a single second of downtime in the whole network. So the network's worked as it's intended the entire time. Whereas gold's been around for billions of years, so obviously it beats them in established history. And then censorship resistant. So we talk about free speech, that's a common theme a lot. So censorship resistant, as far as being on the blockchain, it's even better than being carved in stone. So once it's run on the blockchain, it's immutable if it's a truly decentralized blockchain. And so once the transaction happens, it's not reversed. So Lily can't just say, oh, I didn't get that piece of paper. We can't reverse it unless she just goes ahead and sends it back to me. She can't just be like, oh, undo. Like, it's not possible. And then on the blockchain, too, you can write messages. So right here is a message from Charlie Munger, who's one of Warren Buffett's friends. If you can't read it, it says, of course, I hate the Bitcoin success, when he's talking about Bitcoin, because he's 95 years old just about. So this is even harder of a concept for him to understand. And he's made his money a certain way, so it's going to be hard for him to change. But someone felt the need to put that quote on there. So it's just an example of stuff you can do with it. And then so unforgeable costliness basically just means it's near impossible or very expensive to replicate. So if you were to try and rewrite all of Bitcoin's history, you would need to have more computing power than the entire network, and then you'd have to rewrite it from the beginning. And so it'd be real easy for people to see that. So it's nearly impossible to do. And then same thing with gold. Pretty much gold is gold. Like, you can see it at an elemental level. You can't really change the fundamentals of it. And then a bonus. So for fiat currency, there's estimated $70 to $200 million in counterfeit dollars in the U.S. So an actual dollar is real easy to forge. Like, you can make a fake $10 bill on paper, and assuming someone's not paying attention, you can go ahead and use it. And then as far as programmability, so Bitcoin has a huge advantage here. So if you think of it like the internet, so we have the internet itself, but then there's like Facebook, and then there's Twitter, and there's YouTube. There's apps built on top of the internet that we can use. So Bitcoin as a network is set, and then you can build apps on top of it. So there's one that I like to talk about. It's called the Lightning Network. And right now, if you have Cash App, you can actually do this. And basically how it works is I can send anyone money anywhere in the world basically instantaneously. It works on the Bitcoin network. And so say I want to send Lily, say I have pesos. I'll send Lily pesos. It'll go on the Bitcoin network. And then she wants to accept pesos, she can. She can say, I want US dollars, I want Bitcoin. She can say whatever she wants, and it'll automatically translate that to her. And it settles instantaneously on the Bitcoin network. So that's an example of an app that's been built on there that could be used today by anybody. And then, of course, there's NFTs, decentralized finance, so you can loan people your money. So there's apps being built for that, and there's all kinds of stuff, like anything you can think of is being made on there. And it's not really a fair argument for gold because it's not digital, so there's not ways for you to do that, but obviously gold's still useful in analog ways, like using in phones and stuff like that, using as jewelry. It still has uses. And then, so decentralization, this is one of the key things you got to know about Bitcoin, and it's also one of the hardest ones to understand. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this definition. So according to Amazon Web Services, in blockchain, decentralization refers to the transfer of control and decision-making from a centralized entity, individual organization, or group thereof to a distributed network. Decentralized networks strive to reduce the level of trust that participants must place in one another and deter their ability to exert authority or control over one another in ways that degrade the functionality of the network. And so this picture up here kind of explains it. So normally you think of like a company, there's a CEO, and then there's management, and then there's the workers. In a decentralized system, everybody's kind of the same, and we're all working together for the common good. And so Bitcoin's kind of mutually assured preservation is a kind of a way to think about it. And so that's one of the most magical parts of Bitcoin. And when Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that is, created it, it took a lot to not have human greed get in the way, because it's easy to say, I invented this, I believe in this machine or this invention. I want the majority of it, and I'm not going to give it to anyone else. And so if you look at who actually owns it, it's actually pretty well distributed as a decentralized network. So not one single person controls it. And so there's no single point of failure. Doesn't have a marketing budget, but it inspired me enough to come up here and do this talk, so that tells you the power of it, that I was able to even want to do this. And then gold is somewhat decentralized, but like I talked about earlier, it's confiscatable, whereas Bitcoin, it can't really be banned, basically, is the gist of it too. Like, you can ban it, but if people still have access to the internet and they want to use it, there's ways to get around it being banned, so it's basically impossible. But then as a summary here, you can kind of see head-to-head, Bitcoin wins a lot of the time against gold in most cases. Okay, so then I'm going to talk about some of the common criticisms you get. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm too late. Like people have been doing it for a long time. But in reality, we're actually really early. So like I applaud anyone that's here, especially if you don't know a lot. You're actually very early to it. So only 12% of US adults have actually used crypto in 2022. And less than 2% of people globally own Bitcoin at all. So that, super early. And then this is a chart here that you'll see in like marketing classes and stuff in college. So we're probably somewhere in here in between innovators and early adopters. I'd say probably early adopters. And then once you cross this chasm here, that's where we start to get exponential growth, so where it kind of becomes mainstream. So we're somewhere in here, actually, in my opinion. And then when you compare it to other assets, so at the very top there, you got gold, nearly a $12 trillion market cap. And then silver, which consensus is worth less than gold, but still valuable, about 1 trillion. And then this was as of a couple days ago, Bitcoin's worth less than 600 billion, so not even $1 trillion. So that's the size of the prize that it can capture. So if you do agree with me, like, hey, Bitcoin's actually better than gold, it's not valued that way currently. And then this is from ARK Invest, so they have financial products like ETFs. They focus on a lot of innovation and that kind of thing. So this is one of their analysts put this together. So they're trying to say, hey, what's kind of a realistic pathway, like as far as price? This is the price part I'm actually going to talk about. And so when you compare these different assets, so like global real estate, bonds, global M2, that's just like cash, basically. And then global equities would be like stocks. Whoops. And then you see gold there. So there's a huge potential to steal market share from there. And then just as an example, 10 to $20 trillion of negative yielding bonds are held by people globally. So people actually have their money in something like, hey, you're guaranteed to lose money, but at least we'll like protect it for you. So like that's not necessarily a great investment if you're guaranteed to lose on it, right? So then this is kind of what they would project to be a realistic way to get Bitcoin over $1 million. So 50% of it would be taking it from the gold market cap here. So that's kind of like the thesis I just gave. Corporate treasury, so companies will decide, hey, that's probably good to have on our balance sheet. So that's that. Institutions that invest, so there's people that buy all kinds of stuff like hedge funds, that kind of thing. They're probably going to get some Bitcoin. People have a need for seizure resistant assets, like if you don't want your government to take property away from you, Bitcoin's probably the best way to get censorship resistant property that's not seizable, assuming you have your own keys and everything like that set up. Nation states, so there's actually one country called El Salvador that has Bitcoin on their balance sheet already. So, and they're actually using it as currency. Like they're the first country to do it. That started last year, so that's part there. And then the rest of it's just using it as money and then like sending money. So there's already people doing that today. And so they haven't attributed value to that, so they think Bitcoin can get over $1 million by 2030. So that's like the kind of potential that's there. Not necessarily saying that's going to happen. They might be off on their time, but like it's stuff that you're like, yeah, I could see that happening maybe. And then also globally, many people don't have access to bank accounts. And so like if you look at a lot of the countries here, it's a lot of Africa, a lot of Asia, a lot of South America. They don't have the same financial infrastructure we do where we can just go to the bank and withdraw money. A lot of these places don't have access to that, or even if they do, it's like not easy to get there. So assuming they have access to the internet, this is a potential thing people can use as money everywhere in the world. So it's really exciting to get people that don't have that ability now a chance to actually have that. So then another common claim you get is people say Bitcoin is bad for the environment. But it's estimated 76% of miners use some amount of renewable energy, and it's estimated that 39% of the total energy consumption is used from renewable energy. And I expect that number to go up because renewable energy is the cheapest energy to use. So obviously if you run a business, you're gonna get the cheapest input costs you can, especially with the price of gas. Like it's the first time I've ever seen gas over $4 here. I don't know if anyone else can agree with that, but it's even more expensive to do that. So if you can get solar panels and use the sun for free, like that's gonna be better for your business. And then I got a few examples of where this is actually happening today. So this is like a mining rig for like oil drilling. And then there's miners, Bitcoin miners built there. And so when you go for oil, there's a natural gas excess that is left there. And so normally what they do down in the middle there is they just burn it off because they're like, oh, we don't want to pay to transport it. It's not worth anything to us. So instead of just burning that, wasting it, and putting it in the air, they're actually capturing that and they're mining Bitcoin with it. So they're actually creating economic value from what would be wasteful. And then it's not necessarily this dam, but in Costa Rica, they have a dam that was not profitable. And so they were giving the locals an ability to have green energy, but it cost more to run the dam than it was worth. So they went back to like their dirty energy. But now that Bitcoin mining exists, they were able to turn the dam on, and all the energy that's in excess that the people aren't using, they're able to capture that value. So that energy is not actually getting wasted, and it's profitable for the people that own the dam, whether it's the country or whatever company it is. And then this one's from El Salvador, so that country I was talking about that actually has, they have actually recognized Bitcoin as a currency. They use geothermal mining from volcanoes, and so it's being mined by their state-owned company, as well as they've adopted Bitcoin wallets, and people are actually using it as their currency. There's actually more people today that have a Bitcoin wallet than have a bank account, and it's happened in even less than a year in El Salvador. So it's going pretty well. Still a lot of like things to get over, but they're the first ones to really dive head in first. So then another claim, so Bitcoin is for criminals, you hear that a lot. And honestly, the first time I actually heard about Bitcoin was for criminal activity. So I was in an IT class for managers, and there's a girl that's like, oh, I use Bitcoin, I bought a fake ID with it. And I was like, wait, what? That's what it's for? And so then later on I learned what it's actually for and like what it's used. But just like anything, Bitcoin's a tool that criminals are going to use. And so, but the hard numbers are only about 1% of Bitcoin transactions are used for illegal activity. But it's actually unwise to do that, because if like I send that money to Lily, we can all see that. So if someone's doing an illegal transaction, it's right there on the blockchain for everybody to see. So it's actually like kind of the dumbest way to do it. And it's estimated about 2% of global fiat dollars are used for money laundering alone, not including other crime. And then on Netflix, there's a series called Dirty Money, and it highlights illegal gold mining in Peru and how it's laundered for drugs. So what they'll actually do is there's people that'll use mercury to separate the gold out. So they have these little nuggets, give it to a third party, goes to someone that smelt it, and then it's used to launder drugs in the United States. And it's bad for the person because eventually they die of cancer and mercury poisoning. It's bad for the environment to use those chemicals, and then it's bad because it helps launder drug money. So it's at least an improvement upon those other things, although it's still going to have some criminal activity, I'm sure. And then the best one is Bitcoin isn't backed by anything. And so what it's actually backed by is the global network of miners, and the actual computing power is called hashes. And so if you were to try and meet the power of Bitcoin, it'd be almost impossible because it's 100 times that of Google. So you would need an overwhelming force to actually even start to try and take over the network. And like I said, if you were to try and change the transaction, you'd have to go all the way back and then get to the one that just happened. So the incentives are more for you to use that power to help the network versus trying to attack the network. So it's mutually assured preservation versus trying to destroy something. And then as far as like the price, like you'd say, oh, maybe the price is kind of low, but if it's a free market and it's a truly free market, the price will eventually get itself figured out. And then if people still don't hear me on that, if Bitcoin's so worthless, I say just send me one for free then. So usually people can't really save much back after that. And then as far as the adoption rate, so we're actually seeing a higher adoption rate than the internet itself on Bitcoin. So this orange line here, that's actually the adoption curve for Bitcoin, and the white is the internet. And so if you're comparing the same calendar time, by 2030, it's estimated that there will be almost 3.7 billion crypto users. And if you compare that to the same time on the internet, there was only about 1 billion users in the same time. So it's rapidly being accepted quicker than even the internet was, and I'm sure that was a really quick transition too. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think it might fit in an investing thesis that is common. So if you're not familiar with Dave Ramsey, he has a radio show, and he's been on the radio for like decades. And these are his baby steps to get you started with personal finance. So he first says you start with a $1,000 emergency fund, and then you pay off all your debt, and then you save about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. So that's kind of like your foundation. So you're out of debt, and now you're ready to invest. So then where does it fit in? So the next step is you save 15% of your income towards retirement. And there's actually already today, you can put Bitcoin in your retirement accounts. Fidelity is working to get it onboarded with people and their 401ks at work. And then you can open like your own IRA at different places. There's a few places that have it that you can actually start to own Bitcoin. So it could fit in there. And then 5, 6, and 7 you kind of do at the same time. So say for your kid's college fund, so if you don't have a kid to save for, skip that one. Pay your home off early. If you don't have a home, they say save for it, but if you do, then pay that off. And then 7 is build wealth and give generously. And so once you have that ability, that's where it fits in especially too. And so a real common strategy you'll hear, and this is similar to what I pretty much do, it's called dollar cost averaging. So it's super common, and basically how it works is you decide a set amount you're gonna do, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever that is. And then the key is you gotta stick to your schedule. So say you're like, I'm gonna spend $10 every week. Just continue to do that, like say it's every Monday. Just keep doing that every single week, because the price is gonna go up and down, but in the long run, we're expecting it to keep going up, so naturally you're gonna buy the dips. And then a statistic, so if you bought Bitcoin any single day since its inception, the price is higher than it was for 90% of the days. So over the 12 years, you've only missed out like on a year's worth, people are down. So if you bought recently, you're probably down, but if you've been buying for a long time, you're still probably way up above what your actual cost is. And then some of the magic of Bitcoin too, with everything being on blockchain, there's a lot more transparency. You can actually see like what people are doing. And so this is a really awesome chart to kind of show people are buying into the strategy. So this price right here, or the line up there, that's the Bitcoin price. And then the blue, that's people who've had Bitcoin for 1+ year. And so you'll see that blue keeps continuing to rise, and then price is also continuing to rise. And so this is really zoomed out. And so with Bitcoin especially, you need to have a long-term focus versus a short-term focus. And so if you're sticking to that strategy, you're gonna basically come out ahead is what you've seen. And then this actual number here on the top right, 66% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in over a year. So people are buying it and they're just holding it. They're pretty much believing in this thesis. This is like super common, like this isn't like a completely new idea. And then this is just so this is a meme. So when people think about just holding Bitcoin, they're like, oh, all you gotta do is just hold it and straight to the finish line. But when in reality, you're gonna have a lot of big dips and things are gonna happen. Like when the COVID happened, there was a big crash. And then people tend to get way more euphoric about it, and the price goes up way fast, and then people sell, and then it crashes fast. So there's gonna be ebbs and flows, but in the long run, it kind of smooths out. So basically, the reason why I talk about you need to have your why, you need to know what you're doing, and then also as far as like having a good financial foundation, those are things that are gonna help you stay in the game versus get out and miss out on the opportunities. And so that's basically just what I went over, just to recap, and ready for questions now, if anybody has any. Good.
Okay, so you buy Bitcoin, you buy something else, you sell it, and you've made money on it.
Yeah.
Does the U.S. government get a record of that so that you owe taxes on your gain?
So hypothetically, yes. I'm not a tax person or a financial advisor, like I said, but generally most exchanges, like they're gonna get your license, they're gonna know who you are, and so if you do make a gain, they're supposed to report that, assuming they know who you are, so that's called know your customer. But yeah, I mean, long story short, yeah, like if you owe taxes, you're expected to pay them, just like any asset. And as far as like a regulatory framework, a lot of it falls under the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, but people are saying it probably fits more as a commodity actually. So still kind of working through the regulatory clarity, but like I said, it's impossible to ban, and they pretty much said it's not going to be banned, but they're still trying to figure out how to regulate it. But that's a good question. And then something else people say too is like, oh, well, people are going to regulate it, like people don't want it to happen, but because of this technology, the real question we should ask is, what kind of government should we have because of this technology, not what the government says we should do with the technology. So that's more of like, you flip it on its head, that's actually kind of the way to think about it. Because it's pretty big, because I mean, you're taking away the Federal Reserve's ability to print money, like you're taking that power away from them. And so that's like a huge, like fundamental shift in how governments are gonna work. So that's kind of like a deeper thing to think about, but yeah.
So what are the qualitative advantages of one over the other, Bitcoin and Ethereum or?
Yeah, so as far as Bitcoin, it's set cap. Ethereum is supposed to be, but it can be changed. So a lot of stuff with Bitcoin is like, it is what it is, it's set in stone, like it's got certainty, there's things that are guaranteed with it. Whereas Ethereum, like there's a founder, his name's Vitalik Buterin. So like say he does some crazy stuff, that's gonna negatively affect the price. Whereas Bitcoin, you can't really point to a single person, it's truly decentralized. So that's kind of the main differences, but how they work fundamentally is different. So they both currently work on a system called proof of work. And so Bitcoin mining, that's what proof of work is, that when I handed her the paper, versus Ethereum's moving to a thing called proof of stake, which is kind of difficult to explain, but basically like you have your money and then you put it in a pool so it powers the network. So it works kind of different, and I'm not probably the best one to explain it, but they're shifting the philosophy of how the actual network runs to be different. So Bitcoin's pretty much the first one, and it's hard to replicate because like I said too, you have that human greed element where if you're a founder, you're like, I deserve to get the bulk share because I started it, like I started this whole thing. So that's a magical thing about Bitcoin is someone had to say, this isn't about me, this is about everybody else. So that's in itself hard to replicate. And you're always gonna want the original versus the second one, you know? So it's got that first mover advantage too. But that's not to say other cryptos aren't worth anything, like they all have utility. Like I kind of think of Bitcoin as digital gold if you couldn't figure that out from part of it, but Ethereum I kind of say is more digital oil. So a lot of the apps, there's probably more development going on there for stuff like that, like decentralized finance, and you don't see like NFTs on Bitcoin, you do see them on Ethereum a lot more. So, and those are going to evolve too, which we can talk about really whatever. If you guys want to talk about that more, like I'll talk about whatever. Yes?
So what platforms do you use to buy Bitcoin, and how do you protect it?
Yeah. So you can go on, there's different exchanges. So like Coinbase is one, Voyager. You could buy it on Robinhood if you want to, but there's places to go as far as that. And then you can choose to just hold those on your exchange. It's similar to like if you were to buy a stock, you just hold your stock on the exchange. So that's one way to do it. But then if you want to really like be hardcore and like use Bitcoin how it's supposed to be used, you put it on a cold storage wallet, which is kind of like a flash drive looking thing. And so then you move that onto there, and then you get your address, which is a bunch of random letters and words, which let me try and find what that looks like here. And then you have a seed phrase, which is kind of like your password. So it'll be random words like apple, town, car. It's like 20 random words. So that's kind of like your password. So you need to know your address, and then you need to know your seed phrase, and then you can take it offline. And so that's called cold storage. So that's like the most hardcore way. That's where Bitcoin becomes unconfiscatable. Whereas if you hold it on an exchange, it's subject to being taken away necessarily because like the exchange can control it too. So it just depends on if you trust yourself to not lose your password, or if you think the exchange is going to do okay for you. And then the other thing you can do, like if you have money or Bitcoin on there, you can put it in these decentralized finance platforms where you can actually earn a yield. And so they'll loan that out kind of like a bank. And so they'll give you money to use your collateral. So there's lots of stuff you can do with it, but it just kind of depends on your personal preference, like what you feel comfortable with. But it works similar to how you'd buy stuff on a stock exchange. And you can set like limit orders or just buy market price or do stuff like that.
So do you have any preference for what kind of platform you use to buy Bitcoin, or do you think they're all equivalent?
It depends on the fees and on their security. So like something that was alarming about Coinbase is they said if we go bankrupt, we're going to take care of our shareholders and stuff first versus the users. One I use is called Voyager. They said we're going to prioritize you over the shareholders, and so did one called Binance. And then Voyager allows you to actually earn yield on there. I personally use that one, but it's the safest way, assuming you trust yourself, would be to pull it offline and put it in a cold storage wallet, because that's where it can't be taken away from you. So it's property that's like unconfiscatable. So there's nothing like that exists. So that's just one extra layer of security. But the problem is, like, say you forget your password, that's how you can lose it. So that's why there's been around 2.8 to 4 million Bitcoin already lost, is because people did that. Like, oh, I don't remember my password is. Or they sent it to the wrong address. So like a lot of stuff can happen because of errors. And that's also kind of a negative too. Like say you die and no one knows your keys, then that Bitcoin's kind of lost forever. So that's something to consider. And so for me, majority of mine is on exchanges. I'm not like that hardcore just because I don't trust myself, but most people tend to get there over time if they don't get there right away, I would say. That's more what it's intended to be.
send money to a family member in Mexico or somewhere else. How would that help me?
Yeah, so with the Bitcoin Lightning Network, that's a real awesome opportunity. So even with El Salvador, so say someone's in El Salvador, how they send money to the United States is they got to go to a Western Union or somewhere like that. And so that involves risk. Like say there's people trying to steal your physical money, you can get your money stolen on your trip there, and you may not have a car, so you're walking a couple miles. And then if you send money through Western Union, they said it costs about 30% of the actual cost to move money. So if you're sending $100, you're only getting 70. So you're losing a lot of money just on the transaction itself, and then you're trusting a third party. Whereas now, say you have a phone and you're set up on this Lightning Network, you can send money across the country, and I don't know what they had before, maybe some sort of peso or some currency. They can send whatever their native currency is. It'll go on the Bitcoin Lightning Network on-ramp, and then you can receive it in dollars, you can receive Bitcoin, you can receive it how you wish. So it saves you a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's more secure, and it's quicker because it's instantly going to settle. Like if you send money on Venmo today, it's like, hey, do you want this money in a couple days, or you want to pay a fee and get it now? So you can just literally go on Cash App and use Lightning Network and instantly use that product right now. So that's one of the things that happens today that you can actually do. So, but imagine the possibilities in the future. Like we're going to make better products than that even. So that's why it's really exciting. Yeah.
Does the term mining Bitcoin refer to verifying blockchain?
Yeah. So it's not like a physical thing you do. It's pretty much what computers do, and it's not like a certain, like you can't do it with this computer. It's like it's a special piece of hardware called an ASIC miner. And basically what they do is they verify transactions. They basically just run a bunch of math over and over. And so the math is what creates it, because all this is just like a ledger of like numbers basically. But they all come to a consensus and they work together. And so there's miners, and then there's something called a node where the actual history is stored. And so nodes basically have the entire list of everything that's ever happened. So they capture it there, but the miners are the ones that actually do the work, and then the nodes like store that information.
Okay, so the cost of mining it is really the cost of that specialized computer.
Yep.
And the electricity to run it.
Yep.
So if you have renewable energy,
Mm-hmm.
that takes care of your energy costs.
Yep.
And you get Bitcoin for mining it and verifying that the blockchain was right?
Yeah. So let me go here real quick. So this is the actual like transaction schedule. So people that were doing it early, the rewards were greater, and then as you go through time, it actually gets less and less. But the dollar value has gone up over time too because of that scarcity. And so now today, people are fighting over the 6.25 there. All the miners are fighting over those. Plus, there's like little transaction fees on top of that. So like when we get down here where there's really no new Bitcoin to be issued, they'll still take a little bit of cut from the fees. So that's why like mining will still be prevalent in the future.
Well, then it won't be worth anybody's while to verify blockchain.
So that's what I'm saying. So when you have a fixed asset and there's scarcity, so the only way for it to go is the price is going to go up. So in Bitcoin terms, you're fighting for less Bitcoin, but in dollar terms, it's going to be worth more over time. And so today, they still get some of their money from transaction fees, but a lot of it's because of the actual mining process. So that's basically an incentive to get people onto the network, but then when the network's actually functioning correctly, the infrastructure is going to be there. So it takes a lot of time. So that's why maybe Bitcoin hasn't quite hit $1 million like people might have thought it would already, but it's going to take a long time for everything to work out. And basically every minute that goes by where the network keeps going, it continues to create more value because it's just more confidence that it's working like it's supposed to. But yeah, you're right. So if you have renewables, your energy cost is less. So like that's basically going to help innovate in that space. And if you're doing it for that and you're like, oh, I might as well use renewables for my house and my car and everything else. So it's going to help actually move that transition faster for us, I think. Like it's awesome how the cheapest thing is actually the best thing for everybody else too.
So I know you can't give specifics or anything, but if someone was to look at this at the long haul for investing, for example, if they're ready, how would you compare this with real estate, stocks, and then all the other different cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so let me go to here. Sorry, I'm trying to find my slide here. Okay, so if you look at the price appreciation, so a lot of times you'll look at if something has a good investment, compound annual growth, so what's it get per year. So a lot of the like 100 times and 10 times your amount, that's kind of gone past it. But like I was showing here, so there's a potential for Bitcoin to go to $1 million by 2030 is what they're projecting. So that's like a 25 times return, assuming that happens. Whereas gold, like if you look at gold, the price of that's been pretty steady over time. Real estate's going up a lot right now, but now that they're raising interest rates, kind of going down. And then I kind of think of Bitcoin too as digital real estate in a way, except all the real estate's like in Manhattan. Like you can't go wrong buying any of it. And it beats real estate because it's not confiscatable like we were talking about. Whereas if you have a house, if they're like, hey, eminent domain, we're going to build a highway through your house, like they can take it away. Or people can tank the value of your house by putting like a landfill next to it. Or maybe they can improve it because they put a park in like they're doing in Bentonville. So there's a lot more uncertainty with that stuff. And then like with bonds, like people literally have negative yielding bonds. So like you're literally putting in money that you're going to lose. And then as far as equities, there's arguments to be made like a lot of the stock market's rigged. People have insider information. It's actually shown like Congress outperforms the S&P 500, which if you invest in stocks, like that's kind of the standard is beat the S&P 500. I tried to do it myself and it wasn't possible. But simply holding Bitcoin has beat out all this stuff over the course of its lifetime. I expect it to continue to do that, but it's to be seen, I guess.
So do you recommend diversifying or sticking with just one?
Yeah, I mean, you should really consult someone with your own personal strategy, but I think it's good to have a little bit of everything if you're not sure. So diversification, what that does is it takes away what you don't know, because there's stuff that can happen. And even in crypto, like there's different cryptocurrencies to buy. A common mistake people make is they think, oh, Bitcoin's already done what it can do. I'm going to buy the next one, which we saw a couple weeks ago. There's one of these cryptocurrencies that was in the top 10 most valuable, went down to 0 because what they said they were going to do didn't actually happen. And so it created a collapse. So it's always good to have some diversification just to cover you on stuff you don't know. But I think Bitcoin's worth having in a total portfolio potentially, if you think it's right for yourself. Yeah.
Can I ask you your thoughts on Ripple and XRP?
Yes. So XRP is another top coin, and my interpretation of what they're trying to do is to be for banks and to make fees cheaper. And so their coin actually can fluctuate in price, but it should be more of a stable coin, I would say. Just because if you're going to use it in a bank transaction, you want to have a consistent price. You don't want to buy something and it goes up and down and then you need to buy more, or now you have too much. And then the actual action of it, I think the Lightning Network can kind of make that irrelevant because you can already do that on the Bitcoin network. So what do you need XRP for when Bitcoin can do all this other stuff that Ripple is trying to do? Like they're basically trying to do one piece. And they're more of a centralized company, so there's a guy named Brad Garlinghouse. Like you can put a name to that company, and they're actually in a lawsuit with the SEC right now, whether or not they're a security. I personally think they would be, based on the technical definition. Whereas Bitcoin, you can't sue Bitcoin and say it's a security. Like there's no one to sue. Like you can't do that same thing. So that's just an example. Like some coins try and do stuff that like already exists. So that's part of why you do your own research and kind of learn about what they all do. But I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know if they're doing other stuff besides that, but that's my interpretation of like the main thing they're trying to do is transactions cheap and fast, and Lightning Network already beats them on that. So kind of makes it irrelevant if that's the only thing they're going for, in my opinion. Yeah. But I mean, they could be doing other stuff I don't know about.
Recommendations do you have if someone says, hey, this is super awesome, I really want to get involved, but I still would like to learn more to get to the level that you're at any resources you would recommend?
Yep. So I was gonna get to that. So most of what I learn is from YouTube and Twitter, which sounds kind of weird, but that's literally where I get everything. And so I put a couple of YouTube channels that I watch pretty consistently. So Data Dash, he does a lot of technical analysis. So he'll look at a lot of charts, but he tries to make it not overly complicated because a lot of people will show like random lines and triangles and stuff and try and interpret it. But from my experience, just doing data in general, like even for my job, the more simple you can keep it, the better. So if it's not super simple, it's probably not worth it as much. And then Anthony Papagliano, he talks a lot about business, and he actually has a show called The Best Business Show. But he talks about Bitcoin, does a little bit of altcoins. And then Whiteboard Crypto, they try and break down what different assets do. And it's like animated, and it makes it real simple. And then these guys, Altcoin Daily, they used to actually be like actors in Los Angeles, but then they started a crypto channel, and that's what they do now full time. And then as far as some local stuff, there's a local podcast on this radio network. There's a guy named Eric. He's from Sweden, but he started this blockchain group here. And so this is a group that meets once a month, and we talk about a lot of Bitcoin and stuff. Last week we talked about DAOs, which are decentralized organizations. And so that's like above my head. And normally when I go into a room, I know the most about crypto, but when I went in there, I was like, I'm the dumbest one in here. So there's a lot of great people to learn a lot from. Real diverse group of people, whether it's like their mindset or just who they are as people. There's a lot you can learn from everybody in there, so I'd recommend it. And then they have informal meetings on Sundays. But if you want to get involved, let me know, and I can show you how to sign up for all that. But really, the whole point of Bitcoin is kind of do it yourself and like take ownership of your own money. And so I'd recommend, like, although I gave you like a starting point, don't just accept everything I said as fact. Don't just accept these people are factual, because everybody makes mistakes, get things wrong. Like that crypto that collapsed to zero, I would have said that's one I got that I think is a promising project, and all of a sudden it went to zero. So I would have felt terrible if I recommended that. So don't just take my word for anything I said or any of these people. Like, look multiple sources, and then if multiple people are saying it, it's usually a better idea that's the truth. And so that's really how you got to take it. Like, don't just watch your favorite news person or whatever and just assume it's a fact. Like, that's really a good way to do everything, I'd say. But especially in this space where there's a lot of new stuff, where things change every single day, like, that's definitely a good idea to go to different people. And then in general too, like if anybody wants like my phone number or email, I'll give it out just because I know this is going on the internet. But if you come up to me after the show, I'd be happy to give you that. And I like talking about this stuff, so whatever I can do to help you guys out, I'm here for you. Any other questions?
Telephone number, please.
Yeah, just come up to me after, I'll give it to you.
So how's Ocean Spray doing?
Doing pretty good. We just had a big conference in Boston, so that was our first in-person thing we got to do. So got to meet a lot of people I didn't meet and made me feel closer to everybody. So doing pretty good. Dealing with all the supply chain issues just like everybody else. So I dig into that a lot. And then I'm on Twitter too. I don't have a big following yet, but I'm trying to like things and reply to stuff that I think is impactful. So if you want my Twitter too, I can give you my handle and you can follow me, and hopefully that points in the direction of some good info too. But if that's everything, I guess we'll call it a night then. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. Absolutely.